So, welcome back to the Telco Drift, a podcast exploring tech, telecoms, and other sci fi stories. I'm Pablo, your host. And, well, first of all, as you can see from the background, I'm not in my usual recording hub. So, for me, this again counts as a, Telco Drift pub edition. Yes, I'm not in a pub, but, I'm traveling somewhere. And I think sort of the idea of recording in different locations still counts for me as pub episode. But anyway, so big achievement for the podcast as we passed a quarter of a century in terms of number of episodes. So this is going to be episode 26. And now talking about the theme of the podcast. So first, I wanted to chat about Ericsson and Nokia. So what those two crazy kids are doing, and we're gonna touch on that. But I wanted us to broaden out a little bit the conversation. So we will talk about them, but I think we will also need to talk a little bit about 6G. And I think that's kind of a natural expansion of that conversation. And because I recently listened to a couple of podcasts about the changing nature of the analyst role and how is that changing when we're thinking about the influencers world, I thought, why not share my 2 cents on this? So, how is the analyst world evolving? And by the way, if you're interested in those other podcasts that I mentioned, do message me and I will share them with you. But okay, let's get started now with some of the actual content of this podcast. So, when we're thinking, what is Nokia doing? What is Ericsson doing? We could have like a very long episode on this, but I just want to provide you with a couple of thoughts on the difference that is emerging between these two vendors. And on one side, of course, Nokia has a much broader portfolio into different markets compared to Ericsson, which is more, mobile world dependent. But that's kind of obvious. So I'm just gonna focus on sort of the mobile side of the story. And for me, that side of the story is more and more related with what will happen with 6G. I won't discuss the technical details, and I know everything is in the process of being standardized. But honestly, that the techy part is beyond my pay grade. So I'm going to look a little bit about some of the strategic implications of what they're doing. And for me, their strategies, their positioning is diverging significantly. So if we look at Nokia, of course, the company is going down the NVIDIA way with its AI run play and the use of GPUs to serve both the needs of the run as well as broader computing needs. Now, the interesting thing for me is in the idea that the telco world is not enough. And that, if you want, could be seen as an extension of the idea that has been kicked around for some times of telco's network becoming a platform, delivering experiences beyond what has been their usual gig until now. The big challenge, and again, I'm not going to look at the technical side of things, but for such an approach to be successful, there is the requirement of telcos completely changing. There is a need for a complete overhaul of a telco business, in my view. And we know that telcos are not particularly keen on those big dramatic changes. So I'm wondering whether telcos are really willing to do that or not, because without us changing across the whole board, I'm not sure that such a play could really be successful. Now, Ericsson instead gives me the impression to be taking a more traditional approach. So effectively wants to make its bet is of making the run itself as best as it can be, rather than really creating that very, very broad, GPU and platform play. Now, again, for more technical information, I really need to convince Remy, my favorite run expert, to join me on the pod. So if you are listening and you know him, just give him a nod to join me live, because he can really discuss in depth this type of topics. But significantly, when I look at the strategies, okay, you have one that is going rogue, is a bit more bold in what it's trying to achieve, and the other is a little bit more possibly lenient, maybe can say not necessarily conservative, but more in line with what was expected by the vendor. But what was important as well is that because these two strategies are so different, I think that for the first time in a long time, uh, we can see that a telco choosing one path or the other will bring significant differences in the future of the telcos. And the network itself can really become a differentiator depending on, which path you decide to take. And I know you're gonna tell me that there are examples right now of telcos that have made the right bets on 5G and that they can use their network as a differentiator. Yes, there are some examples of that, but I would say there are not a lot of those examples. So there are a few of them. And I think that with 6G, with different paths being taken, there is the opportunity for telcos to really start differentiating one from the other. And that will be interesting to see because right now everyone does the same thing, which is sort of kind of boring in my view. However, there is also another point that I think it's important to be made, and that no matter what will be the preferred vendor, because of the unique situation of Western telecoms, which is a market where some players cannot, it's a market in which some players cannot play. So there are primarily two big options, right, that we have discussed so far. And I think that no telco will in any way want to take the risk of being fully dependent on a single vendor. And so it doesn't matter the preferred option, there's still going to be a little bit of a compromise if you want. And most telcos will just have to use both vendors, just because you cannot be a telco only dependent on a single vendor. I think that's not going to happen. So either way, whatever path you choose, you're going to have to use the other one as well somehow. But also something else just came to mind. I know vendors and engineers and tech people are really excited about 6G, but this is like an honest question. Um, why should consumers or telcos or enterprises be excited about 6G? Um, I don't get it. I know a lot of people don't like when I say these type of things, but realistically, what is the excitement for me as a consumer, as a telco, or as an enterprise? Um, Again, I do see it from the angle of like the beauty of creation, but I'm thinking about who pays for it and who makes money from it. Possibly it's because 5G is still an open wound, um, but I think there needs to be something that will bring the excitement past the vendor and development phase into the actual world of real people. Now, alongside the excitement or lack of excitement about 6G, I think from my end, I'm really looking forward to anything that is NTN related or anything that is flying or is away from Earth. And this possibly because it sounds slightly different from what we have seen so far. And by the way, I think the time of drones is upon us, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, if thinking about NTN, there's been like one big announcement recently, and that is Amazon Leo announcing its intention to launch 5,150, I believe, satellites that will use global spectrum. Again, that's targeted to the market, voice data, messaging, emergency services. And first of all, for those who were wondering why did Amazon Leo acquire global, what the bottom line is spectrum, I think that this announcement makes it quite clear. Now, what is also interesting about this announcement is that the company plans to partner with telcos, so really wants to make sure that there is that clarity in what Amazon Leo wants to do, which is like getting telcos on board. Timeline, we're talking starting deployment 2028, but we know timelines are a little bit subject to delays, and the constellation will operate alongside its first broadband constellation, but also alongside global constellations. Apple is mentioned in the release, so we knew that it was like one of the first low-hanging low hanging fruit opportunity for Amazon Leo having acquired Global, since the company already had that partnership and was also invested in by Apple. But the other thing that caught my attention is that IoT is mentioned. And for me, this is interesting because for all the promises about D2D and the 5G like experience and blah, 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 and a lot of things that are unlikely going to happen anytime soon, I think that a lot of D2D will be IoT. And is that good? Is that bad? We know how the IoT market is. So if a lot of D2D will be IoT, where there's a lot of, everything that comes with it in terms of, the use cases, the price point, the revenue, so on and so forth. But once again, NTN is a hot market right now, so one to watch out for. So now I have no idea how long I've been talking, but let's talk a little bit about the analyst role and how that is changing. And the question is that how is the analyst role changing in the era of influencers? Let's start by saying this. I think that from analyst role perspective, so not personal, but sort of what I get in general, being part of that industry, there is a little bit of stigma. So there, more than a little bit, actually. The analyst world does not like influencers, and that's partially because analysts, they do tend to have the assumption of being the only one truly knowing the markets, and I strongly disagree with that. I strongly disagree with that perception that other categories, whereas like influencers or journalists, are not as knowledgeable as analysts. And in fact, there are a lot of people. I think the debate analysts versus journalists is a good one, because I know a lot of journalists that have amazing knowledge of the market. So for me, I don't see just because you're categorized as a different role, different work, you shouldn't be able to have that knowledge. I think you can possibly use it or hide it, but it doesn't matter what you do, you can have like a very good knowledge of what is happening, what is like 5G cloud or whatever. So that brings me to the next point, that the difference between analysts and influencers, and if you want just throw in journalists as well, is mostly cosmetic. So it's maybe practical, you can say, how you deliver the knowledge, what tone do you use or what tone can you use, and how broad is the message that you send out, how broad is the base receiving it. So those for me are the real differences. You can be whoever you want. You may know the market a lot or or not know the market at all. It really is not related with what you do. But obviously, I expect, and I think that's pretty obvious, there's going to be significant overlap as we move forward in the years. And more than anything, for all the hate that we see between analysts and other categories, I would imagine analysts to wanting to become more influencer-like. Well, if nothing else, because of the money, I would imagine influencers getting more money than analysts, but I don't know. And part of that evolution, I think, is already happening. And unfortunately, right now, a lot of the sort of analysts turning into influencers, trying to turn into influencers, is taking the shape of cringy posts on LinkedIn. But I think that is the issue there is that I have with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is horrible, like honestly, more than anything else. But I think the transformation has already started. So that's the point that I want to make, and I don't think we're gonna go back. But again, thinking out loud, another difference that comes to mind, and this probably is gonna be more relevant for, let's say, a vendor or a telco or whoever it is. There is a structural difference between the analysts and the influencers, because analysts tend to be mostly structured entities, so they're part of established companies, while the way that I maybe erroneously think about influencers, I see them more as role players that do not necessarily play by the rules of the analyst world. And that of course brings pros and cons. It's like how how strict you must be in the information that you want to deliver, or how much you care about delivering certain type of insights. Yeah, just something to think about. And honestly, I don't really personally know any pure influencers. I only know a couple of hybrids, analysts slash influencers. So maybe I'm a little bit off with my outside interpretation of influencers. So let me know if that's the case. But I must say, I do follow a couple of pure influencers on some platforms, and I think their content is great, like really insightful. Anyways, so kind of closing this, let me know what you think. Do you need to become more an influencer as an analyst, or can you live your life as an analyst in the age of AI, where research is being shaped uh, significantly? Let's see. Let me know. So I think we're at the end of this, pub edition, which is actually recorded on the road. So a couple of recommendations for me, as you know, moving beyond the, usual analyst talk, and these are loosely based on the topic and idea of what intelligence is and where it comes from. Uh, they are quite famous pieces of both book as well as movies. So recommend iRobot and 2001: A Space Odyssey to really start thinking about how intelligence is changing, and how to interpret it. So that's it for today's podcast. And as always, thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode. Have a great day.